Well, thanks very much for speaking to me, and thanks very much for a fantastic book. It's a really great read. So good.
Thank you for the kind words and for having me.
Uh-huh. So I mean, the first thing I'd love to speak to you about this book is quite it's quite fitting actually. I interviewed Josh Malaman yesterday, just yesterday. So
Oh, no way.
yeah. So it's quite fitting to speak to you today because he actually wrote the afterword for this book because I think you initially released them in monthly chunks of 10,000 words or so, and then
Yes,
it's kind of had a life of its own, and you've revised and refined it a little bit. I'm quite curious. Can you kind of briefly take us through the journey of how it went from how it initially started and what you felt needed to be refined for this final product?
absolutely. Yeah. So I started writing them, but it had no title for a long, long time. In the summer of 2020, when, the COVID pandemic was taking over the world by storm, I'd gotten kicked out of college along with everyone else, off campus. I was here in my dad's office where he's
Right.
got like all these like spinning paperback racks and stuff, doing my online classes. And I just felt like I was going stir crazy.
Right.
Reading all the great books I had to read for school, like Cormac McCarthy, Faulkner, Toni Morrison, um, Willa Cather, uh, Chopin, just so many great books that, to read and write essays on. And then all the horror and sci-fi I'm surrounded by up here. I was just going crazy. So I had to write a book. I had to
Uh-huh.
just write one for myself. And that was super rough. I kept a printed out version of that very rough first draft that I wrote over that summer around me through senior year of college and just kept working on it. And then after I graduated, I started a Patreon page where I would do, a short story every month. And I'm not very good at brevity, so a lot of times my short stories would end up being like 10,000 words long.
Right.
So I was like, I need a break from the short stories. I need, a little re creative reset. So I was like, I'm gonna take that book I've got. It's rough. It was really rough then, and freshen it up. Um, and back then it was just, rough in every sense of the word. Very
Hmm.
much looked like the first draft of someone's very first draft of their very first
Right.
novel. Um, but I really put a fine tooth and comb on it when I was posting it online and really just honed in on the characters and their personalities and their motivations and some of the finer details of the world. And then after, I posted it in those serialized chunks online, Brian Freeman with Vividian Publications up in Nova Scotia, he read it as it came out and he ended up really liking it and wanted to do, Levidian does these gorgeous hardcover editions that are, always limited in a print run, but they're just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, we got Robert Minji on as an editor who helped me out a ton with just, some of like the structure and a lot of pacing as well. Pacing has been a constant, thing I've been tweaking. But yeah, so the Levidian edition came out in about 2024, and then um, having that complete special edition to show to mass publishers was awesome because then when I took it to gallery, Ed Schlesinger, one of their top editors, probably the best editor in New York, he was like, yeah, "This is awesome. I want to publish it, but we'll make some tweaks too."
Right.
Which was, I'm the kind of guy who you give me notes or any kind of feedback, I'm there, I'm on top of it, I want to take advantage of it. And he gave me so many great notes, so many great little additions to the book that or scenes like there's one scene at the end in a safe room that totally has transformed in each iteration of the book, and I keep liking it more and more every time.
Right.
Um, so as much as there's been little fluctuations, the heart and the core of the story has stayed the same though, which has been cool to see.
Hmm. I mean, but I mentioned there Josh Malerman. When I read the book, obviously the obvious comparison is going to be I Am Legend, Matheson's I Am Legend. But he actually says that it has more in common with The Shrinking Man, right?
Yeah,
Was that something that was kind of that you were more inspired by, or was that just something that Malerman came up with afterwards? That he said it was more reminiscent of The Shrinking Man than the actual I
I
Am Legend.
I think that's a really good observation on Josh's part because I mean I love I Am Legend. I've seen, um oh God, what's the old movie
The
called?
Omega Man.
The Omega Man. I was gonna say
Yeah,
like the Radiation Man or something. I was like,
yeah.
that's not right. Um, and I've seen all the different movies. I've read the book and the comics, which were awesome. I forget who did those, but so I read when I read that and I saw I Am Legend. I was like, yeah, you hit it on the head. And then
Hmm.
I kept reading. I got to the Shrinking Man. I was like, he might be onto something
Yeah.
there. Because I've seen the movie, the original with the black and white. I forget the actor's name. Um,
Which one are we talking about? Charlton Heston? Is that the one? Oh,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
Charlton
I,
Heston, no?
yeah, and he's up against the Black Widow. Yeah, I mean that freaked me out when I was a kid. That and I remember being at very first time I went to Disneyland when I was a little kid. Um, it was like maybe the only time I've been to Disneyland, honestly. But I was like 7 or 8 years old, and they had this. I love the movie Bugs Life, great movie,
Right.
but they had this big like Bugs Life, or maybe it was a Honey I Shrunk the Kids exhibit, and where the whole bit was making everything seem big and giant, and I just remember being a little kid, and it freaked me out really bad because I mean, it was, you're safe, you're in an amusement park, but just the idea of like, yeah, a giant black widow or an ant or even just a shoe could come stomping around the corner at any second and you just can't do anything about it. Um, so when he said that, I just kind of had a flashback to, yeah, that book and that story or in that movie definitely scared the crap out of me as a younger kid.
Uh-huh. I mean, that was one. The I Am Legend was about vampires, but here in them, it's a very specific creature with a very specific anatomy. Obviously, I don't want to spoil anything, give anything away, but you call them scorpions. I think that we can say that now. They call them scorpions in the book with very specific genetics. I'm quite curious how much real animal genetics came into was kind of informed the book, and how much is just informed by yourself creating it by
Yeah.
yourself.
I I had so many there were times in writing this book where I would just have I'm usually the guy who hates having extra tabs open on his internet
Right.
browser, but when I was researching this, I had so many just because and a lot of it was more on the space side, and a
All
lot of
right.
it had to do with figuring out the conditions of I really just picked Gliese 6cc or whatever it is, the planet that
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned is so much of it was honing in on the specifics of what life would be like there. How massive is the planet compared to Earth? What's the gravity like? What's the daylight cycle like? Is
Mm-hmm.
there a daylight cycle? Is there sun? What's the water conditions? And a lot of it was for me working backwards from there and figuring out, okay, how would something have, survived this? How would something have evolved to meet this environment and this habitat? Um, and then I there's normal Earth stuff too, just like armadillos, and looking at
Right.
their plating, and real life scorpions, and just a lot of anything with an exoskeleton was. at some point I was looking at like dissection pictures of where they've got it all pinned back on a on cork board.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. Just trying to, and some of it definitely came just from me and just me trying to make something as strange and foreign and alien as possible
Hmm.
to Earth and to humanity. Um, and so, some of that was just like, stuff that I know happens like bioluminescence, in our own oceans that I wanted to kind of steal and flip on its head and reappropriate. So, instead of there's algae in the ocean that glows because that's part of the chemical reaction that it does to give itself energy. These guys, their eyes glow just so they can find you better and so they
Yeah.
can hunt you better. And there was a lot of fun ways to take, real environmental asset or evolutionary assets that different animals and plants and organisms have and make them into something more lethal.
Hmm. Talking about by extension of that, I mean, one of the more unsettling aspects of kind of post-apocalyptic fiction stories is the fact that the definition of the monster is constantly shifting, and that's very much the case with them, right? So I'm quite interested whether you were more interested in the external threat or what one you were writing, or whether it was you were more interested in the ways that ordinary people change under the pressure.
Yeah, I think it absolutely started off as a full-on monster story.
Right.
Because I grew up on, the Sci-Fi Channel, Ice Spiders, all the, Arachnophobia Weekend and Godzilla and King Kong and the Tremors movies,
Yeah.
newer stuff like Cloverfield and Pacific Rim.
Right.
I just always loved giant monsters. And I mean, going back to like the shrinking man thing, that's just, that's the sense of scale has always been terrifying, but also exhilarating and like, yeah, if Godzilla was real, I had the chance to like see him, even from a distance, I'd probably go for it just because
Hmm.
who's gonna get to see Godzilla? Um, so it definitely started out as just like a love for the monster and just wanting to see a world in which you see an apocalypse in which the monsters really came out on top.
Hmm.
Because in so many of these movies and in these creature features where you've got including the movie I took the title from them, the 1954 Giant Radioactive Ants, which
Uh-huh.
I still love. One of my favorites as a kid. Um, but even, in those, so much it's a case of hubris, humans, governments, militaries, experimenting, trying to create often a weapon and it blows up in their faces and they can't control it. But still, a lot of those times the movies have a good ending.
Yeah.
Someone, figures it out and saves the day in the end, and the human race is saved. And I wanted to, part of me just wanted to give the monsters a shot, and see what they would do when they just win, and
Hmm.
when they have totally beaten us down. And then and in that I was really interested by the human aspect of that as I kept
Yeah.
exploring it. Because it's not like we have a chance to come back really. We're beaten. We are, cruising to extinction when the book begins. And there's so many great apocalyptic stories which are so hopeful, but some of my favorites are the ones that are just totally dour, like The
Yeah.
Road by McCarthy,
Right.
and just yeah, just I mean, even Mallerman's Bird Box, which is a really wonderful ending. There, it's still like there's still a permanent change to the world. There's no getting back to how things used to be. Um, and and I think a lot about Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Miller Jr., which is a great post-apocalyptic, nuclear war post-apocalyptic, but very much still exploring some of those same ideas of how do we find hope in utter defeat, and what are we going to try to hold on to and cling to, and what are we going to try and make sure gets remembered, um, by whatever comes next, even if it's not us.
Uh-huh.
Um, and working working to that from a place where you're already defeated was was challenging but fun, because it ended up being a lot more optimistic and hopeful than I thought it would or could be,
Right.
which was nice for me. I was like, okay, it's not totally depressing.
Yeah, I mean, you said you were going a bit stir crazy when we started to write this book because you kind of dropped out and all those kind of things. I'm quite curious about the actual kind of the kind of metaphors of the book because, for example, I was reading that Richard Matheson, for example, didn't appreciate that people ascribe metaphors to his books. Um, he said that he preferred it. I think his son's opinion on I Am Legend was that it was prophetic in relation to AIDS, for example. But he said that he
Mhm.
preferred that people didn't ascribe metaphors. I'm quite curious if you ascribe your book to any specific recent occurrences, or was it not directly related to anything in specific?
Oh, that's a good question. And I actually I hadn't heard that specific Matheson bit before,
Yeah,
so that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up, that he was a the curtains are blue kind of guy.
yeah,
Um, but I think for me, I'm almost the opposite way, because it is about so many different things that it almost, and for me it was specifically, but at different points, and it was just always fluctuating, and that was, I kind of just let that happen, because then it would, all kind of blend together and become a little bit more of a mystery, a little bit more fun to untangle. Um, so, there's, I think the one that, I really had in mind when I started was climate change. Just
right.
like the and the idea of, like, I've always been fascinated by any story where the Earth's almost able to defend itself from humanity, and that's not what's happening here, but it definitely is adjacent. And and just that the scorpions, the monsters, are an exponential problem that, if not addressed immediately, is going to snowball into total catastrophe. Um, and as a young person, like right now, I just feel like me and my friends, we look at so many different things in the world, and we feel like, oh, that's a snowball rolling down the hill. We might be dead by the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, but our kids and our grandkids won't.
They'll still be
Um,
around. Yeah,
yeah, so, but climate change was definitely a big one, just because it felt like, well, and because I wanted something where, unlike climate change, I didn't want the Earth itself to really be impacted by my apocalypse. I
yeah,
didn't want the animals and the oceans or anything else. And that's mentioned throughout the book, that most animals, other than the ones we domesticated, are pretty much ignorant to, humanity's absence. Or if, you're a bat, you're pumped, because now all of a sudden there's a whole lot more addicts that nobody's going to shoot you out of.
hmm
So in that sense, it was almost like a counter to climate change, because, climate change destroys everything. In some sense or another, bleaches reefs and causes, uncontrollable forest fire. This is the antithesis of that, where it is almost directly targeted against humans, and
yeah,
that was fun. And then there's a lot of um, war stuff too.
yeah. I
Uh,
was going to say that one of the a quote that picked from the book, which was really struck a chord with me, was "Difference is a creek that flows into the lake of fear," and it just
yeah,
kind of really, it was really kind of the metaphor towards war and those kind of things. Yeah,
yeah, and I and the war between the scorpions and humans when it's really at its peak, we don't see any of that fighting in this book. And I think a lot of that would be a fun thing to revisit sometime if I ever did like a prequel or something.
Hmm.
Um, but the yeah the just you get the sense that there was an all-out, total, no holds bar war between humankind and these monsters. That was just take no prisoners, no questions asked, and the no questions asked part is, I think, the most important in this book, just because it's so much of the conflict just comes down to a lack of understanding and communication. And, had those questions been able to be asked, what would the difference in outcome have been? And I think that's that's one thing that I like about it that makes it a little more general is that, so much of it is just asking about what could have been had things played out a little bit
Yeah.
differently. And that applies to anything. That's what we all go to bed thinking about every day. Um, Even we're just, oh, this could have been a little bit better if this happened. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on there, and it was definitely fluctuating at different points. But I think you hit the nail on the head with that quote. That's one of my
So
favorites.
it's a fantastic quote. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, talking of quotes, it also the book really kind of shines a light on the magic of the written word and literature because I don't want to, obviously I don't want to give too much away, but the aliens are kind of envious because humans are able to write and communicate in a certain way. So, I mean, was that something that you were kind of wanted to kind of be lifted from the page by the readers, or was that something that
Yeah.
just came organically as you were writing the book?
No, I'm so happy you mentioned that. I think you're the first. Just that little bit at the end that they are jealous
Yeah.
of the written language and of just so many different aspects of humanity that they can't quite grasp. And for me, I grew up with my dad, Richard Chizmar, in the cemetery dance warehouse, just surrounded by paperbacks like these.
Hmm.
And storytelling's just always been such a huge part of my life, and it feels almost to me it feels almost wrong to write a book without giving the nod to the written word
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
one way or another. And it echoes too because we only really have two human characters, and one of them is able to stay a lot more in touch with himself, with his identity, with his wants and desires, because he writes to himself in a journal,
Mm.
because he is, constantly engaging with himself through language, through the written word, constantly trying to express himself in a finer way than just an amalgamous blur of emotions, and electricity firing off in your head can do. Um, so yeah, I think I'm such a nerd for literature and for books in general and just
Hmm.
storytelling that I'm always gonna try and find some way to throw that in there. Um, but and that moment you're referencing specifically just came up really organically, as I was thinking about, the top of the mountain, not to spoil too much, and the
Yeah.
sign, the hiking sign that's there. Um, and just trying to put myself in their shoes and think, what would I make of this relic, this artifact?
Hmm.
Um, how would this fit into everything else I've seen in this world? And I, to me, the fact that at the end of all of that violence and gore, that I felt honestly I could still come away with the answer being jealousy and enviousness and a sort of whimsy almost. That was cool. That was a the monsters, the scorpions, they earned all the credit they get, I think.
Yeah, there's lots of hat tips to pop culture in the story, and when I'm reading books, I love needle drops, even though you can't actually physically hear them. It's great, and there's plenty of needle drops in this book. I'm quite curious what kind of role music plays with you as you're in the writing, whilst you're writing a story.
Oh, I'm almost always listening to music when I'm writing.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I'll have like sometimes I might have the news on just in the background, but usually it's music.
Right.
And I know some people can't do that because they say they get distracted, but I love having just that flow in the background because it almost gives you someone to play catch with almost
Yeah.
in a sense. I grew up playing lacrosse, and in lacrosse, the biggest thing you do to practice is you hit the wall. You throw a ball against the wall, and it passes it back to you.
Right.
And the music almost feels like playing wall ball in lacrosse, in that I can take a sentence and I can say it out loud to the beat of the music, and even if it's totally off, even if it's not the right beat for that sentence, just getting that sense of rhythm that exists outside of just myself, outside of just my head, is so helpful to me. And then I think it also just encourages me to do like some weird stuff with syntax and diction.
Right.
Music's, a lot more like poetry than prose. The rules are a lot less strict. You don't have to make as much sense. You can be a lot more flowery and repetitive.
Mhm.
And there's just so many different I'm a terrible songwriter. I've tried. I had a bunch of buddies in college who are fantastic musicians, and I just cannot do it. I always end up writing like a Johnny Cash song that's like a folk story. Um, but you just being able to like be in conversation with that and get that feedback and get that rhythm for me. I just it's a big part of my process, honestly.
Yeah.
And I really I don't go without music a lot. Um, and
But
then
do you
sorry, go ahead.
do you specifically root out certain types of music? I mean, you said that it doesn't really matter what kind of music it is. There's always some kind of feedback. But do you specifically seek out certain things? I mean, yesterday I was speaking to Josh Malerman, and he moved his camera slightly, and he had like a huge vinyl collection
Oh
of
yeah.
movie soundtracks.
Oh, the movie soundtracks. Those are awesome. I have like started those at other writers' suggestions.
Right.
Um, and I a lot of the times will go for like Halloween or Friday the 13th or something.
Yeah.
Or like Alien, a lot of the oldies, but goodies. But I'm really just like a hodgepodge. I'm one of those guys who my main playlist is like 48 hours long or something ridiculous. It's got
Mhm.
an obscene hundreds and hundreds of songs that I'm just like, oh, I like this one. I'll throw it on there.
Yeah.
Anywhere from, some movie soundtracks to Johnny Cash to Jimi Hendrix and newer stuff like Cage the Elephant, Rainbow Kitten Surprise, or ABBA going back again. I mean, it's really just anything and everything that, speaks to me in one way or another. And a lot of the times the music that's mentioned in the book is just music that was playing or had just
Right.
played or was next up on the playlist. And so in that way it was like that was one of the most fun parts for
Uh-huh.
me was what was those needle drops and similar to the way I tried to elevate the written word. I tried to do with music because it's just another way of storytelling, and
Yeah.
to me our stories are humanity's most important treasure, um, and it was just all part of our main character's experience and his journey of discovering what did he want to hold on to and keep precious to him. What did he want to spend the time and effort and energy to remember?
Uh-huh. And coupled to that as well, I mean, music kind of conjures a specific idea in your mind because there's so few characters in this story. I'm very curious if you kind of had someone in mind while you were writing it. I mean, for example, I keep going back to Richard Matheson, but I can't help it. But Richard Matheson, he said he would have loved to have seen Kurt Russell or Nicolas Cage play Robert Neville in I Am Legend. So I'm quite curious if you had anybody in your mind while you were writing the character that I won't talk about because you actually don't specifically name him until right towards the end of the book.
Yeah. Um, Forgive me. I'm gonna do a quick Google because I can't exactly remember his name.
Okay.
Uh, oh my God, the stupid AI overview. Uh, David Johnson, the guy
David
who
Johnson.
played Peter McVry in the new Long Walk movie. Did you
Oh,
see
right.
that?
Okay, I've got you. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who played Pete, David Johnson. And he was in Alien Romulus too, but usually I do not have a good answer to this
Yeah.
question unless like Widow's Point, if there's a character who's a woman in like her 50s or 60s, I say Jodie Foster
Right.
automatically. And so in Widow's Point we had Professor Duran, so I was like Jodie Foster every time. I don't know anyone else, just that one. Um, but I remember watching The Long Walk and just having a few like moments where my heart just like kind of seized up and I wasn't like, walking down a main country road anymore. I was in North Carolina with this guy. And he was the guy from my book all of a sudden. And I was like, that was weird. That's never happened really
Uh-huh.
before.
But that
Uh,
was way after you finished writing the book, yeah.
yeah, because when did that movie come
And
out?
that's quite recent.
Last year?
That was this year, last year, no, yeah. That was
Yeah,
quite recent, yeah.
September of last year. So
Yeah.
by that point, I had pretty much I was just doing some edits with the gallery editor still, but I think
Yeah.
our serious stuff was still done. Was already done. We were just kind of in the nitty-gritty nitpicks of it all, which I need to because I make a lot of typos. Um, But yeah, I just his performance as Pete I mean, that's one of my favorite Stephen King movies all time now. And um, he was just so good, man. He stole the
Yeah.
show, I thought.
Uh-huh. It's quite curious you bring that movie up because it's one of those it's similar in a way to them in the fact that you think it would on paper you think it wouldn't be kind of motivated and frenetic, but just these people walking along on the road, but it just works so well, yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of it is just like about like the long walk about being a young man too, and like the specific anxieties and pressures that come with that at some times.
Hmm.
Which I always like reading the long walk as a high schooler. You just feel like, oh shit, I'm not alone all of a sudden.
Hmm.
It's just, which is the best thing a book can give you. I remember reading that in high school and just being like, oh, people have always felt this way. That's good to know.
Yeah. But well, before I let you go, I'd like to ask the authors a few rapid fire questions just to see what they come up with. So I'll
Yeah.
just finish off with that. So I mean, being a writer, if your life had chapter titles, what chapter would you say you're on now?
Oh God. Honestly, just title it that. Oh God. Uh, because I'm just, I feel like obviously Widow's Point last year was awesome and a bit of a whirlwind, but them's been a whole different story. Where I've just been
In what sense?
sorry.
In what sense? A whole different story.
Oh yeah, just it's my solo debut. I've I've got events every day this week. I'm
Sure.
flying to Indiana for a festival tomorrow, um, and with Widow's Point, it was like everyone was complimenting me and my dad was like, "Great job, guys." Now it's
Right.
just me, and now I'm feeling like, a little bit of that pressure, but a lot of also that excitement, and also just like I just I want to get back to writing my next one too.
Right.
But it just oh God, because it's like so many different things come into culmination and you know paying off that I'm just a little overwhelmed, but also just ecstatic and pumped.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, and you're talking of your dad. Your dad's like as ecstatic and as pumped as you are because I've seen on social media that he's sharing how proud he is all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, he makes me blush, but he's I'm so lucky to have him. He's my best friend and like my partner in crime, and for your dad to be those people is not easy. We
yeah,
had to work hard for that relationship, and we're both proud of it.
brilliant. And while you were writing this book, I'm quite curious. Was there a mistake that you're secretly grateful for?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, oh. Widow's Point, I know there was because at some point I messed up keeping track of we did those painstaking file titles for each
Hmm.
file number. And so everything was very specifically organized by its every chapter title was like a file number. It had to
Yeah,
be numerically sequential. Um, and at one point we had messed a bunch up, and I was like, let's just get rid of them from here on out so we don't have to go back and fix these and just make it like null and like the time code corrupted so that
yeah.
it's sort of like a creepy you know found footage
And
aspect.
footage. Yeah,
But them, there's a part where it says what percentage of how like what percentage of humans that the scorpions attack get eaten and what percentage get used for something else. I bungled the math on that like 5 times with 5 different editors, literally like several different copy editors pointed out, and every time my math was like slightly differently wrong, and I wasn't happy about that, but it eventually got fixed. But it was a mistake that kept happening.
brilliant. I'm also quite curious. What are you your own worst enemy about when it comes to writing?
Oh, definitely perfectionism, and just trying too hard to make sure that like everything up until a certain point is picture perfect and pristine, and then I can go on and keep writing. Um, or even just I'll be good about it for a little bit, and I'll just write without worrying about reading what I wrote. And then I get sucked back in to the past because of like, oh, I gotta check what was this character's name again, or where were they from again? And then I'm like, oh, I've got to edit this. I got to reread all of this. I got to refamiliarize myself. And I just spend
Yeah,
too much time before, I've even gotten to the end trying to do the work of that first revision. And, I think, and this is always the number one advice I give to new writers is just get to the end. Just get to the end, get that first full draft. It's
yeah,
not going to be good. It's not going to make
yeah.
sense.
The rough draft that has to be rough. Yeah,
Exactly. But it's so much easier to do that revision work when you have that complete picture, even if it's, real rough. So, for me, it's just I always want to do the revision work that I really need to save for later,
yeah.
just because I get obsessive.
Uh-huh. But is it easy for you to was it easy for you to sign off on that project once you finished it and say, right, that's we can't there's no more we can do to this. It's done and dusted off to the publishers it goes.
Yeah, I mean, and it definitely makes you feel confident at the end. I'm still the guy who will make a little bit of changes as long as you let me.
Yeah.
Really the only thing stopping me from making changes is how much time do I have to read it. Um, but especially with the tremendous editors I've had, I've had a lot more confidence than like, when I was publishing stuff online and the only people reading it were me and my dad. When I would hit send, it got to 100 people or more, depending on the year. And that was a lot more intimidating in a way because I knew I didn't have, a whole team of people
Yeah.
behind me. So in that way, it's just, definitely a relief that I know other people have poured over it too.
Brilliant. And just one final question before I let you go. If the scorpions could review humans, what would they complain about the most?
Um, Cars, traffic, 100%, and skylines. They would not like skyscrapers and skylines. They would want to be any obstructed sunrise or sunset would be a big problem. Um, so if you had scorpions living in the ocean, they would not want any big hotels on the coast because they would block the sunrise or the sunset, depending where you are. Um, and the traffic too, which is my number one complaint also.
Brilliant. Listen, Billy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I wish the book's just come out. I loved it to bits. I hope everyone loves it as much as I did. And I hope to speak to you again sometime soon, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Howard. It's a great
No,
conversation.
it's been great to speak to you. All right. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Take care of yourself. Bye now.